If you just look at currently how our trains are running throughout the country, you've only got to see the news. They're not running on time, they're delayed, the services are terrible. And don't get me wrong, London, as you know, Darryl, you work in London and you commute very often. London's great, Crossrail, the Underground, there's been lots of investment there. You try and get a train from Manchester to Sheffield and you'll have a completely different understanding. And I understand the HS2 firstly doesn't directly tackle that issue, but having that high-speed rail network running to Birmingham and running from Birmingham to Manchester, that's the artery of the country. And then the veins off that go into these other connections. They're going to cause such big improvements. For example, I live in Crewe, which is just outside of Manchester. I did live in Manchester, now I do live in Crewe. It's a massive railway town, and I can tell you now that the infrastructure that is in place has been up since the 1950s. And we work on it, and we don't get the investment to change it. We're just told, make it work. We live in 2020. Why are we just making things work? We need new infrastructure, and we need spending.
What do you do, Jordan? What do you do on the railway?
So I work on the overhead line, so we actually work on the electrification side. So you could say I'm quite biased HS2 at being high-speed rail electrification. But,
well, keep you a job for a start.
well, this is the thing, though, Darryl. Unemployment is so high in the railway sector at the minute. We've seen some of the highest rates of unemployment since the 1950s. Myself personally, and many of my colleagues, we are contractors, and we've been struggling the last 16 months. There's just been no money invested at all. And tonight I've drove all the way to Peterborough from Crewe just to get to do a shift because the work's so scarce because the money's not being properly invested, and we're crying out for this investment.
I wonder, Jordan, if it's not really the investment that's the debating point here. It's where that investment goes, right? So the point is, as you very well point out, and as I often endure and experience, I mean, it can take me as long, or at least half the time, the journey time, to get from Manchester back to my family home in Bolton as it takes me to get from London to Manchester, right? It can take me 2 hours to get from London to Manchester and an hour and a half easily to get from Manchester to Bolton on a bad day if things aren't running well, which often they aren't these days. The point is that we're going to spend this billions and billions of pounds on HS2, on this main artery up the country, which for the most part, is working relatively well, and not invest it, at least it doesn't seem to be a concrete plan to invest it, in some of those smaller territories, those linking Liverpool, Bolton, Manchester to Leeds, Leeds up to Newcastle. Actually, it's just misplaced, this investment, isn't it?
I completely understand where you're coming from in respect to that, and I know the Northern Powerhouse plan to invest in them sort of areas, but the way I'd look at it is, if you've got a high-speed rail network running from Birmingham to Manchester and Manchester to Leeds, that's opening the door for all these other smaller boroughs and towns, smaller cities, to be able to connect into that. And I think if you throw billions just in the north, and you don't connect it properly up to Birmingham, you're still going to have them issues. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a few. I've worked on HS2, I've seen the plans, and there's a few things that I look at from somebody who works in tech, and I think, wow, like the underground tunnel from London to Birmingham itself, the scale of that to be done, it's quite eye-watering. Now, it can be done. We did HS1, and nobody says how bad HS1 is, that's great. HS1 was a great success. It connects us to the continent, and that's what I think people need to realise.
And what about HS3? So when we're talking about this connection east to west, west to east, across the north of England, that's HS3, proposed around a relatively similar time. Would it not make more sense to do HS3 first?
I'd say no. I'd say we need to connect what you said earlier on. I think connecting London to Birmingham, Birmingham to Manchester, that's the first thing. Setting a major kind of key cities, and in between that, there's many towns that it'll run through. And the thing is, Darryl, the reason why I think it should be done that way first is we're going to learn a lot from doing this. We'll probably find when we do HS3, we can probably do it with a lot better budget and probably a lot quicker. There's going to be a lot of learning curves doing what we're doing. Because you've got to remember one thing about HS2. The rail network's running directly into the cities. So we're not going around the cities and around the towns. We're running straight in. I was on a field just outside of Birmingham 2 months ago in a big farmer's field, and I was working with a contractor, and he said, this is going to be Birmingham International Station. It'll be the biggest railway station in the country. And it was just a farmer's field. Now, I understand that there's a lot to be done, but I think getting them major that are done first will be the first thing, and then we can work on HS2.
Jordan, we hear a lot of stories about how chaotic the HS2 plan is, how over budget it is, how behind schedule it is, how hard it's going to be to implement this new piece of infrastructure in the first place. Never mind whether or not it's a good idea. As somebody who works on the railways, Jordan, I appreciate you obviously have company loyalty in mind, so your honesty is much appreciated. Is that your view, that chaotic scene that we are painted? Is that how the reality is on the ground?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be honest with you. The railway, not just HS2, the railway is a very funny industry. You hear stories. Sometimes we go out to work and we do 2 hours work and over a 10-hour shift. But you need to understand the processes in place for this kind of scope of work to be done. It's quite unprecedented. And for example, just a quick one, when we were having the induction for HS2, they told us they were going to use as much steel as 3,000 Eiffel Towers. So you can understand that, it's a massive goal we've got to complete, but think of the jobs, think of the skills it's going to create.
So you say at the moment, though, Jordan, that you're doing sometimes 2 hours worth of work on a 10-hour shift. Now, I'm seeing infrastructure problems. I'm seeing our railways in some instances at a standstill. I mean, you get on Northern Rail and it's a total disaster. Why is it then that you're only doing 2 hours work in a 10-hour shift? What's leading to that?
Well, there's a few things. So we can only work when trains most of the time aren't running. So if your shift is you start at 10 o'clock and finish at, say, 8 o'clock in the morning, you probably won't actually get on the actual railway till about 1:30, 2 in the morning. So from 10 o'clock till 2, you're probably just sat in your van or just doing paperwork. And then you've probably only got about 3 or 4 hours actual work time when the trains are stopped. So, you're working round the trains, and because our train system is so busy, sometimes you might only get 2 hours actually on the railway out of the whole 10 hours you're there, and that's just the reality of it is. But one thing you need to remember, with HS2, it's going to be all new infrastructure, so we won't be working round running trains. So that's one thing you have to remember. But, when you're doing work on existing lines, there have to be trains passing through in the morning. That won't be happening for HS2.
Yeah, so in terms of speed and efficiency, that'll certainly help, I imagine. Jordan, nice to talk to you. Thank you so much for your call.